Madam Chair, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. How many people in this room are busy? Yeah, I see a lot of busy people. Do you have an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to sit down and write a speech out? How many people have that luxury? Some people do. Awesome. Chris has that luxury. Chris, we all envy you. Sometimes we don't. Myself, I'm a mother. I have a husband. I have a family, a home to keep. I work full-time, and I'm also an area governor in Toastmasters, and I do a whole bunch of other extracurricular activities as well. I have not yet finished my Competent Communicator Manual because I couldn't find those 2 to 3 hours to sit down and write a speech. Some time ago, I heard about something called a table topics speech. And I was like, what's that? Table topics is just a short 2-minute presentation. Now, for the guests in the room who aren't familiar with table topics, it's a portion of Toastmasters that allows us to work on our impromptu speaking. A table topics master will give the room give one person a question, generally, how do you feel about Mayor Corrigan? And the person has 2 minutes to talk about how they feel about Mayor Corrigan. They need to make a mini speech. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I thought, well, how can you make a 5 to 7 minute speech out of a 2-minute speech? How does that work? Well, let's turn on some technology. Woo, it works. And take a look at the parts of the speech. So when you think about a speech, you think about your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. Now, how many people work? How many people go to meetings at work? I see a lot more hands raised as well. In those meetings, have you ever been surprised to know 15 minutes before the meeting you're supposed to talk about something? Yeah, I see some heads nodding. I see some heads nodding. This is also going to help you as well, this technique. So when you think about the parts of the speech, you think about coming up with all this information and talking for 5 to 7 minutes. Now, a table topic speech isn't that much different. You can see we've got an introduction, and we time it at about 30 seconds. Then we've got the content at about 6 minutes. But notice I've got question 1, question 2, and question 3. So I'll explain sort of what those mean as we move along. And then we've got the conclusion at 30 seconds. So we can see all of that time adds up to 5 to 7 minutes. So the first thing we need to do is we need to pick a topic. Daniel, would you mind handing these out? For those who want to participate in the workshop, you can go ahead and here's some pens as well. Daniel's going to hand out the worksheets so we can do the workshop as well. I'm sorry, I should have handed those out sooner. Before we get started, I want to explain the worksheet that you're getting. We've got the Writing the Table Topics worksheet on this side, and this is the side that we're going to work on today. I've got spaces for you to fill out as we go along, and a space at the bottom to make notes. The back of the sheet has just the points that I'm going to go over today to remind you later on if you forget or if you want to use this technique again. Now, getting back to my busy life, I was like, how can I come up with this speech and use this technique to stand up and talk in front of my club for 5 to 7 minutes? Well, as I sat down to think about it, I realized I needed to pick a topic first. That topic is the theme that you're going to speak about. It's something that you should have expert to intermediate knowledge in. It's something you should be familiar with, and it's something that you should be passionate about. When you put all of those things together, you realize that finding a topic to speak about is actually not that difficult. Everyone has something in their life that they're passionate about. I believe one of our guests is a nutritionist, so she wants to learn how to do workshops and things like that. That's something she's passionate about, something she knows very well. Now, when I tried this technique, my theme was driving. But when you think about the topic driving, there's lots of stuff you can talk about. You can talk about people who talk on the phone, people who don't signal, people who speed through school zones. You can talk about cutting people off, all these different things. And that's when I realized that's way too much information to throw into 5 to 7 minutes. So I realized you need a subtopic. Now your subtopic allows you to focus your theme, to be specific about something, and it avoids audience overload. You want to try not to give your audience too much information in that 5 to 7 minutes. You want them to be able to come away with something. So my theme was distracted drivers. That's what my focus was. So now it's your turn. For those of you who want to participate in the workshop, I'll get you to go ahead and choose your topic and your subtopic. Your topic is your theme, something you're familiar with or passionate about, and your subtopic is going to be something that you want to speak specifically about on that theme. I'm just going to keep moving on here. Sorry, Sylvia, does that green light mean 15 minutes? Okay, just making sure. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create the body of your speech. And that's where the table topics parts come in. How many Toastmasters here have been table topics masters before? Okay, so we've got a few hands raised. And you know, when you're the table topics master, your job is to come up with a few questions to ask people and surprise them to develop their impromptu speaking skills when they're brought up to the front of the audience. When you're doing a table topic speech, you want to do the same thing, but you're going to select three questions that are grouped together. They're going to follow a logical progression, and the easiest way is to come up with questions that start with who, what, when, where, why, and how. What this does is it creates instant content. Now I'm going to show you my examples with my distracted driving. What is distracted driving? Why is distracted driving bad? And how can we avoid being distracted drivers? Now, for those of you who are familiar with table topics, I think you can probably see right away how I can easily speak for 2 minutes on each of those questions and basically create instant content inside my speech. Now, I'll give you guys a minute here just to go ahead and create your own questions really quickly based on the theme and, the topic and the subtopic that you chose. And move on here. The next thing that you want to do is think about your introduction and conclusion. Now, some of you may be wondering why I've gone and put these sort of in the middle of the process. Aren't you supposed to start right away on your introduction? That's how you begin your speech, right? Sometimes I find it's easier to write the introduction and the conclusion after you know what the content is about. Think about if someone hands you a book and says, "Can you tell me what this book is about?" Quickly. Basically like writing a conclusion. Have you read the content of the book? If you haven't, how can you create that conclusion effectively? So sometimes it's really important to know your content before you can write your introduction and conclusion. Now you want to keep them brief, about 30 seconds each, 1 to 2 sentences. Go ahead and write them out if you want. This is about the only portion of your speech that you're actually going to write out and memorize. I'll give you a couple seconds to sort of think about what you would want for your introduction and conclusion, and then we're just going to quickly move on. For my speech, I did an introduction that was basically a role play. I pretended that I was a distracted driver trying to give her child something in the back. It was a very effective attention grabber, and I simply concluded by reminding people what I had spoken about. Finally, and I know some people might be wondering why, let's do the speech title last. Again, knowing your content, knowing your introduction and your conclusion helps you come up with a more effective speech title. How many people have written a speech title first, written their speech, and then changed their speech title after their speech was written? It was a lot different once you had the content down. Suddenly that original speech title didn't make as much sense. So I always recommend do your speech title last. because it's usually the hardest to try and come up with first and the easiest to come up with after your content. And a couple quick suggestions for your speech title. Simply restate your topic and subtopic. Write a summary statement. Or you can use a catchy phrase or colloquialism. Although this last point I would warn members on, simply because for a lot of people, if you're ESL, you may not understand what a colloquialism is. You may not understand what the person is trying to say. So this one you want to use sort of with caution. For myself, as I was growing up, my mother used to always tell me that I would drive her to distraction. So that's what my title of my speech was, Driving to Distraction. Now, what I've given you here are some quick, easy steps that allow you to have a technique to create a speech in less than 15 minutes. Based on what you have in front of you, how many people feel confident that with a little thought, they could stand up in front of people and speak on this for about 5 to 7 minutes? Idea behind this speech is that you actually don't write it out. So you want to use the table topics impromptu speaking method when you're doing this speech. This technique is really great if you don't have a lot of time, but you want to finish your Competent Communicator manual. It's also a really great technique to use for meetings. I've had my boss come up to me and go, "Hey Danielle, you ready for that presentation? Yeah, you know, the one you're giving at the meeting in 15 minutes. I'm giving a presentation. Right, on that project you're working on. You know, you have to give up that report. It's about 5 to 7 minutes that I need you to speak for. Oh, yes, of course I'm ready. Excellent. My boss walks away, and I go, yes, I'm ready. So the idea behind it is to very quickly put your questions down. When you ask yourself a question in table topics, you can answer it right away because you're familiar with that knowledge. You have an expert intermediate level of knowledge. Okay, I'd like to go ahead and finish with a few examples that I've come up with to sort of give you an idea of how you could apply this to other topics. Another passion of one of my friends is actually gardening and cactuses, or cacti, I believe is the correct plural. The introduction that she came up with using this technique was the story about how she killed her cactus when she overwatered it. She didn't realize that you're not supposed to water them too much. When she came up with her content, her questions were, what is a cactus? Why does overwatering kill cacti? And how can we avoid killing cacti? Her conclusion was simply to remind the audience of the 3 points that she had brought up, and she had a 5 to 7 minute speech. Another passion of mine is tabletop gaming. Anyone here familiar with Dungeons & Dragons? Hey! One other person. Okay. Tabletop gaming has been around for a long time. It's a great experience for people to get social with each other and to work through problems. So people who do know about it often have stereotypical stories. You know, it's people sitting in a basement drinking lots of pop and rolling dice and doing crazy stuff. So when I did this, I talked a story about stereotypes, about, you know, people sitting in the dungeon and all things like that. My content was, what is D&D? Because as we can see, not very many people are familiar with it. Why play it? Well, it's a great social game, helps you develop your problem-solving skills. And how can I get started? So just a quick rundown of where you can go to get started and how you can start playing yourself. I reminded the audience about my points, and I was finished my speech. David Suzuki. Who here knows David Suzuki? Yay! Canadian icon. My friend did a speech, and he talked, his introduction was a story about how he was inspired when he saw David Suzuki speak live. His content was, who is David Suzuki? What is his passion? And how can you get involved? He reminded the audience about his points, and he finished with a quote by David Suzuki, which was, we must reinvent a future free of blinders so that we can choose from real options. So it's okay to finish with something a little different than those points. Thank you very much. I hope that I've given you some techniques today to help you be able to write a speech or come up with content really quickly and feel confident to deliver it. Thank you.